Okay,
We're on, great.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I got to tell you, I've been talking about this panel all week. I think it's probably going to be one of the best ones that's going to be offered all day long. I'm a TV anchor. I have been for the last 15 to 17 years. And the thing that you will always hear a producer barking when you're pitching a story, what is your visual? I don't want to hear about this story. I don't want you to tell me about the Ford hybrid car or the new health plan that you're offering unless there are pictures that can go with it, because guess what? TV is a visual medium. So that's why it's sort of apt that I'm moderating this panel today, and we are all here today because, of course, as Frank will tell you, even though TV and film are still king, we are all here today because digital has obviously got a place in our lives. So I want to introduce some of the folks that are seated next to me. Frank is a former director with Google Think. Thank you for joining us. Eva Smith from Pinterest. Her correct title is Head of Marketing Communications as well as Insight. And to her right is Dipanjan Dey, who is, and you've got a long title here, my friend, Industry Lead for Financial Services for Facebook's ad business. And to his right is David Berkowitz, Chief Marketing Officer for a company called Making Brands Remarkable. Please give them a round of applause. You know, what's great about this is that I got to spend a few minutes on the phone with everybody before we took the stage. And what I actually want to start with, Eva, is there are some really unlikely candidates that have had great success with their visual on Pinterest, and Bank of America was one of them.
Yeah, so we were really lucky with Bank of America, but taking a step back, you know, to level set on Pinterest, you know, there are three tenets to how we tell marketers how to think about Pinterest. The first is that it's about the future, meaning that when people are coming onto Pinterest, they're coming on to really plan what it is that they want to do next in their lives. So that's tens of millions of people discover, saving, and doing the things that they want to do next. Second is we tell people it's not a social network. The point of Pinterest isn't to connect with your friends. It's a very personal network. I'm trying to achieve something. I'm trying to do something with my future. And last but not least, brands are incredibly welcome on the platform. 2/3 of all of those highly visual pins on Pinterest come from a brand site. So if you were to take all of those companies off of Pinterest, you wouldn't have a platform anymore. So the reason that I'm giving you this background is that Bank of America was incredibly savvy, and they realized, well, people want to have a great wedding, or they want to plan their garden, or they want to buy a car, or maybe they're thinking about having a family. So what they did is they really positioned themselves as the enabler of people's future. How can you afford that wedding? How can you budget for that garden? How can you make sure that, you know, you can afford that car that you want? And they only had a handful of incredibly well-curated, useful, highly visual pins, and the campaign was phenomenal. It drove thousands and thousands of actions on Bank of America's site. We have a public case study that anyone can go and look at, but it's a real example of a client that was smart enough to realize the power of a visual and how you kind of insert yourself into the right consumer mindset.
And the other company, it was a little bit of a chicken and the egg, but you realized with Lay's potato chips, people were taking that product and creating a garden variety of recipes.
Yeah.
And so that resulted in a whole new product.
It did. Actually, Lay's came to us with their product Wavy Lay's, and they said, you know, snacking on chips is great. I probably do more of it myself than I should. But how can we get people to start thinking about it as an ingredient? How can we drive more recipes and more usage of the product? So we worked with them, again, to create incredibly useful, really compelling pins that people could save and use for recipes, and it was so unbelievably successful, the campaign. How much people were sharing these pins, how much that they were saving them, that what the organization chose to do was take all of that great content and create a book that is now being sold in stores so that you can tap into a lot of that insight. Again, they realized they were onto something. People wanted these recipes in their future lives, and they took those offline and created a book, and it's doing really well.
And Dipanjan, Chobani Yogurt actually did that very successfully with Instagram as well, where it became more of a lifestyle choice as opposed to a single one-off product.
Yeah. So Chobani's a really interesting one because I think
Their biggest challenge was when people think about yogurt, they think about a sweet product that they'll probably have in during breakfast. And so they wanted to change that perception. They wanted to be an all-day lifestyle food that you can have at any time. It can be savory, sweet, whatever. And so they used Instagram. And one of the things that's very unique about Instagram is that we feel like people go to Instagram to be inspired. It's one of those platforms that, somewhat similar to Pinterest, you do connect with people that you know, but people actually go to Instagram to see people that they don't know, and they want to get inspired through the visual imagery and videos. And so what Chobani did was they wanted to take advantage of that inspiration. And so they created very, very strong lifestyle imagery showing Chobani as a product that can be had for lunch, dinner, and it went beyond just being sweet. And the videos the photos were incredibly eye-catching. And again, it felt very native and organic to the feed, right? There were beautiful lifestyle imagery showing Chobani in different times of the day and different types of meals. And it was incredibly impactful, and I think that campaign had like a 7-point lift in people realizing that Chobani was not just a breakfast food, which was ultimate success. And
similar to the Bank of America example that Eva gave, GE also leveraged the platform to be able to sell cars.
Yeah. So I think it was actually not exactly cars. It was for so GE wanted to use the platform to really appeal to a younger demographic, and they used visual colors that they felt like. Actually colors like green and imagery that made General Electric really, really cool.
Like deep red, because women love to drink wine.
Yes, I mean, yeah, it was actually very, very interesting insights. And they were able to use it. And again, I mean, the thing that's so powerful about a lot of these mobile platforms is that you have this news feed structure where you can take up the entire canvas and really catch people with colors that are meaningful to these people and target it to these specific people. And so they saw a lot of success there.
And David, I often talk about Chris's Blue Rock Energy tie-up with the Buffalo Bills, but you have a similar one with National Grid, that you're able to take an energy company and be able to leverage the power of the visual.
I mean, what's been really interesting is that, a lot of the brands we work with at MRY are on the B2C side, like Visa and Johnson & Johnson and others. I had marketing for our own brand where, to your point, as far as what's the visual for it, the first hires I made when I joined there for my team, we're getting a designer and a videographer for doing our own marketing. And we have some interesting cases like National Grid, right? A utility company where we started, we're trying to look them and get them active on social channels, and Instagram became a really powerful one for them where they're not going to necessarily have the same kind of scale as a big B2C brand, but it's just been a great way to talk about topics that are near and dear to people's interests, like the weather, and getting into some historical examples, some images from.
Well, it was really storytelling. How are people using energy in their lives?
Exactly, and so all this, it's something that matters to people. It's just not one where it instantly, it wasn't one of those no-brainers that they had to be there. But once they started using it, they just got wrapped up in it more and more, and wanted to keep seeing. Okay, so I'm sure you're going to see a lot more just visuals that represent power saving and things that can help you keep money in your pocket this summer. That could have been a much more straightforward email campaign. I'm sure they'll keep doing that, but now they've got these added tools too, which are making a company like this totally rethink how they connect with people.
Well, Frank, it's not like video killed the photograph star, but video is definitely a close cousin when it comes to visuals. And so talk to me a little bit about the evolution of websites and video.
So I love what these guys are talking about. It's basically taken a bunch of users, put them together, inspired each other, and they're sharing. Right? This is not professionally necessarily produced content. Certainly in the way YouTube started, that was not the case. And Plus, you've got brands that are coming on. Brands have been coming on to, call it user-generated content or what have you, for a long time. It's only now that people are finally noticing it. There's a study that if you were able to shift 9% of the TV market in ad dollars, you would more than quadruple what's being spent on mobile right now. And there's 9% to go over. So it's exploding. And as sort of an experiment, I thought I'd just try something, if that's okay. Yeah?
Okay.
So this is a little experiment for this crowd out here, which is an opportunity for you to meet one of the most important brands in the world. All right? So try this with me. Bear with me for a second. Just turn around to the person behind you, or to your left or right, and introduce yourself. Because that person...
Nice to meet you.
How's it going?
You can be part of our circle.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, now
All right,
everybody
to
come
us.
back.
Okay, yeah, so
It's a very chatty group.
that is exactly the example that these guys just talked about. That may be one of the most meaningful conversations you have today, just right there. And it wasn't provided by a big name, polished producer of content, shall we say. It was provided by you. And the platform is what's becoming really, really important, how you get that out there. So,
Well, it used to be that a website was just static.
Yep.
Then it was a video. Then it was a website that offered video, and now the evolution is live video.
yeah. Anyone from Periscope, from Meerkat here? Yeah, so the live video is where, in my opinion, is where the next evolution of video goes, along with sort of how you search and use metadata to find stuff on it.
And Gretchen, I'm curious, what has the introduction of autoplay on Facebook done for video on the platform?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, and I remember a lot of brands come to us and say, what are the best practices? How do we really crack this? And some of it was, we weren't sure what the best practices were because we had to see how how users were consuming autoplay. And what we found was interesting. I mean, I think the first thing is something that we refer to maybe internally is it's the 3-second audition, meaning when someone is, I mean, if you think about the newsfeed structure, someone can just easily swipe away a video, right? It's going through your newsfeed, it starts to play. Now that person has an option to no longer watch that video. It's a little different from pre-roll. And so because of that, you have to really earn that view, which means within those first 3 seconds, you need to grab that person's attention. And you also have to remember that there's no sound, right? So there's a bit of that visual cue that you have to give that person that, hey, maybe I should turn on the sound, or don't even have sound. Maybe it doesn't need to have sound, right? And so it's a different way to think about it, and what we found is brands that are most successful think about Facebook and Instagram as a separate medium from TV. If you put just TV ads onto Facebook's newsfeed, a lot of times in TV ads, the hook is right at the end, or the brand attribution is right in the end, and those almost always fall apart because, again, you have that first 3 seconds that are just so valuable, and you need to really hook them right there.
And what about on Instagram? I know me personally, I follow a lot of makeup artists on Instagram, and they manage to do like eyebrows in a couple of seconds. But what is that? How are brands leveraging that?
Yeah, so I think Instagram, again, it really is the center of inspiration for people, and I think, and it's that premium real estate. It's one of those places where we don't show a lot of ads, so when ads do appear, it's incredibly, it sticks out, and I think even to this day, we still have our founders, Kevin Systrom, reviewing every single ad that goes through Instagram. So we make sure that it's very high quality to preserve the quality of the news feed on Instagram. And so what we found is brands really use it, especially to reach out to millennials, right? We have a high number of millennials on Instagram, which I don't think is a huge surprise. And just globally too. We have 300 million people on Instagram, the vast majority, 70% of which are global. And so that's been very effective for influencers and brands alike.
Eva, Pinterest was kind of the last frontier as far as the one platform that did not offer ads, but now you've taken promoted pins out of the beta testing, and in the last year it's become kind of the way forward.
Yeah, so we were in beta last year, and we learned a tremendous amount. Bank of America and some of the examples I just gave you were some of our beta partners. And in January, we opened it up generally from a promoted standpoint. And I think the difference with Pinterest versus Instagram is it's an environment that's so open to brands that a lot of times when we're promoting that content, it's content that we're putting in front of people because you've purposely expressed this is a problem I'm trying to solve, or this is something I want to do in my life, or this is something that I think will help me with a nursery or with my garden or with buying a car. So we're really excited to be doing that. And more than that, when you promote on Pinterest, again, because it's future facing, because people are telling you what you're planning on doing, you in effect have a focus group of tens of millions of people because they're all raising their hands and saying, this is what I plan on doing. This is who I am. This is how I plan on using your brand. This is when I plan on potentially buying your product. And you're really able to get some very interesting insight into how consumers are thinking about your brand. So just to give you kind of a more generic example, we did an analysis for Valentine's Day. We wanted to see what the behavior was on our platform around Valentine's Day vis-a-vis different products. And what we found was that there were two distinct waves. The first wave is what internally we called the good boyfriends. And these were people that were going on the platform and they were customizing jewelry and they were buying things online and they were putting a lot of thought and effort into what they were going to do for Valentine's Day. And that activity started picking up 2 months before the event. Then there was a second wave that I am ashamed to admit I'm part of, which is the, oh crap, Valentine's Day is 3 days from now, what am I gonna do crowd? And that was literally like, what can I get from the convenience store? What can I cook? What can I, do really quickly? And then on the day of Valentine's Day, we found that it was the last group, which we were jokingly calling the Lonely Hearts Club. And those were the individuals, the number one pin on Pinterest that day was like, I'm gonna be like Han Solo on Valentine's Day. And there was a lot of information about people going out with their girlfriends or their guy friends, going to restaurants, having parties. So by promoting your pin, by tapping into that mindset, you can kind of learn how people are thinking about your product in a way that you might not be able to on other platforms because of that future facing. And that example with Valentine's Day is just one of those things that we were able to tease out.
David, you brought up an interesting point when we were talking on the phone, is that you really push your clients to ask the question, what am I going to get? So what? We got 300 people liking something, but what's the so what? What am I getting in return?
Yeah, well, I think that the economics of content are changing a lot, and I think one of the most important trends to appreciate is that previously, I mean, let's look at Facebook as a great example because they've been there all along, right? And they were visual from day one. So Facebook, this whole idea, you build up your audience, great, keep amassing that, maybe even pay to do so, but then they made a bigger push into advertising, and now if brands really want to get exposure for anything they're doing on Facebook proper, they've got to pay for that, right? That was something where Twitter also followed that lead, even if it's not quite the same setup. The vast majority of your followers alone aren't going to see something when you post it. I mean, Pinterest and Instagram are kind of in this next wave, and we're getting to see how all that plays out there. But clearly, one of the big problems is just the more that everyone is using this, and the more you have these hundreds of millions of users, then no matter what happens, no matter how brand friendly they are, most brand stuff is going to get buried unless there's some paid push. So that means that brands have to make their content work harder for them if they're because from day one they have to start planning on how is this going to get to their target audience, whether they're existing followers who've already raised their hands and said, we definitely want to see anything that comes out of this brand, or there's always that much bigger audience of people who aren't following them yet. And so with all this, that means that there needs to be just more of that so what going into this, right? It's not just, you can't just say, well, my potato chip brand got 500 likes on this thing, and the other guy's got 400. That's less and less relevant, and so.
Do you have an example of someone that you've really pushed to kind of ask that question, or that they've come, a client that's come to you and you were like, you know what, I really want you to think critically about this?
I mean, there's something where we've got one financial services brand where they're a leader in their category, and a big focus of theirs is just making people use the products they already have more often. And so a lot of that is still a case where we're going to need access to more their data. Over the past year, they've been investing enough in this so that you can have that right scale where you can really measure something that's harder to do if you're just doing this whole toe in the water approach. So as far as the results-driven things I can share, I might need a few more rounds of begging for permission to do so. But this is something that's on all of our brands' minds, and it's going to be a really interesting challenge for creative agencies like mine going forward, because now when you have to pay for both the creation and the distribution, again, the economics change, and it's just all going to have to work harder for you.
Frank, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the advent of mobile and how that's really changed everything in the way that we consume information in the last year, especially when it comes to video.
Correct. So I was thinking about this as I was hearing you guys talk, and it's still really hard to get video onto the internet, even though, for example, at YouTube, over 300 hours a minute are being uploaded. It's still hard for you to get the relevant video up when you want it up, what you're programming, and so forth. But mobile has become, it has for a long time, and certainly everyone in this room knows this, it has become your first screen. So the question now is, well, what happens after mobile? Because there's going to be an after mobile. The cable model is broken, so but the business is good. But there's going to be something after mobile. I don't know if it's a watch, it may be wearable clothes, but something else is going to be your information provider. And the concept of mobile will stay the same. You want to be able to carry your video with you wherever you go.
So let's talk about that in the context or through the lens of Google Think and what some of the things that you were doing there.
So pretty much or so when I was at Google, we were instructed that this is mobile first. And I would take meetings and wouldn't bring a computer in with me and just want to see a product. Just show me your product on your phone. Right? So I was working at YouTube. So just show me your video content or your particular app or your technology, but I only want to see it on your phone. And I wouldn't tell these people necessarily in advance that I was going to ask this. I just was curious what their experience on mobile was going to look like. So we pushed very hard on mobile. And Google is still doing that, as well as, I would say, every company on here. The uptick in mobile has been astounding. The YouTube app itself was one of the most quickly downloaded apps on the Apple platform. No surprise to anybody here. It goes back to the question of, well, you've got your phone, which produces pretty darn good content, but how do I get that up to a place where people are going to want to see it?
Deepanjan, we've been talking about big brands this whole time, but small businesses is part of where Facebook is really targeting a lot of their efforts right now. And one of the big changes in the last year is that they now, as a small business, would have access to Getty images if imagery is something that they need.
Yeah. And that's part of our push to really up-level the quality of content in Newsfeed. We want small businesses to have access to that kind of quality. I mean, if you think about small businesses and the power that they now have, whether that's through Facebook or YouTube or Pinterest, getting photos or sight, sound, and motion. I mean, sight, sound, and motion used to be something that you could only access via TV, which was just a natural obstacle for small businesses when they wanted to advertise to the people that they cared about. But now on the mobile phone, you can do this in an incredibly efficient way, whether that's through video or photos. And what we want to do is just, with that ability, we want to make sure that we're giving the tools to our small businesses so that they can publish very, very high quality, engaging content.
Great idea.
I think, if you want to weigh in.
No, I think this is terrific.
I mean, I think
Smart.
in talking to everybody, before we got up here, predictive analytics is something that came up again and again and again. So Eva, I'll start with you. As we kind of do the horizon scan and we're looking out into the future of what's next for Pinterest, contextualize predictive analytics and promoted pins for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I gave you guys an example previously of some of the insights that we can help drive into the marketplace. And one of the things that we do for many of our small businesses is we believe that the image is very important and the pin is very important. But if you only think about that, it's kind of like a really beautiful bridge that only gets you about halfway across the lake. So one of the things that we do is that anybody, any of us, can turn our Pinterest account into a business account. And all of a sudden you get a tremendous suite of free analytics. So we think that it's very important for the people that come to Pinterest to both be able to have access to analytics around how their pins are doing, who's interacting with them. If you are a content creator, you have a pin it button on your site. How is that driving traffic to Pinterest? We think it is incredibly important that people realize the visual and the data are interlocked. And then I touched upon some of the insights that we provide to our promoted partners, because by promoting it, you have the volume to get really deep into, what is it that's going on the platform. And that's something that we're investing really heavily in because, as you said, you're going to invest in the visual. On Pinterest, sometimes that visual will have a half-life of over 90 days, and the pin will be evergreen. So you want to make sure that what you're creating is really going to resonate, and that when you are making that investment in the creative, you're making it as strongly as possible. So to us, we think just as the creative is incredibly important, if you don't tie it in with the data, you're not going to have success, and I have to imagine that follows across any platform up on the stage with me.
Frank, if you and I were at a cocktail party and you had explained to me user-generated content and where that's going to have a place in the future of video, what would you tell? Pretend you're telling your mom.
Okay. First, yeah. If I'm drinking red wine, I end up with a car or something. So the future of UGC,
user-generated content.
So right now, it's basically everything is UGC and nothing is UGC. What you want to watch is what you want to watch, whether it's a highly produced game or show, or it's, as I said to you earlier, you want to watch your friend's daughter's high school basketball game. That's what you want to watch. So that's where things are going. And the issue becomes, well, how do I get that to you? Like, how do I know what you want? How do I predict that this is what you're going to want to watch, whether it was produced by a big brand or it was produced by one of your friends or what have you? And that's where data becomes extraordinarily important. And then I was going to continue along those lines. But
you gave me a baseball example that I thought was really interesting.
So when I was at YouTube, sure. So when I was at YouTube, I brought Major League Baseball to our platform. And one of the big issues on the table was, hey, people upload content from games. What are you going to do about that? Right? So they were like, well, we're not going to do anything about that because what you do at a stadium with your phone is your own business, and we're not pushing that. We're not looking to get into that. All right, check that one, fine. What are you going to do about people who take a snippet from a broadcast game? Well, that's a bigger issue, right? Because for a sports league, they're generating, in the case of digital, tens or if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Certainly in the case of television, it's billions. And if somebody can take the exact broadcast piece and put it on the internet, wow, that becomes questionable as to what is the value of that highlights license and so forth. And we pointed out that, at least on YouTube, the content that was getting, let's say, snipped from a broadcast and put up there, you could take it down, or you could leave it up, and you could direct people back to your site. This would free your editors and other folks to produce higher quality content, stories, and so forth, and leave it to the group to handle a lot of the commoditized stuff, like just let me just see the dunk, right? And now someone else puts the whole story together. And they accept that by and large, and you'll find that Major League Baseball has a remarkable trove of user-generated content now on the platform, on YouTube.
And Dipanjan, the B2B space on how people are going to now receive, how they're going to reach the decision maker at a Procter & Gamble, or how they're going to reach a decision maker at, let's say, the person, Colgate Palmolive. That's also changed drastically, or that's at least where it's going.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about Facebook is we have a lot of a massive data set, and when you think about panels and panels of people when you want to do research or try to figure out who you want to reach out to. We have a panel of 1.4 billion people globally, which is pretty powerful and helps us model the kinds of people that you want to reach, whether that's executives at P&G or small business owners or the people that run procurement at a small business. We have that data. We also have what we call real people, right, on the platform. And so that helps us with third-party partnerships that we run with folks like Axiom, Epsilon, where they also have information about people that are small business owners. And in a privacy-safe way, we'll do a data match, and we can actually directly reach out to the kind of people that you want to reach out to. And that's where B2B marketers have actually had a lot of success.
David, I'll leave you with the final thought here before you open up to audience questions. Disappearing threads. You would have thought that that's something relegated to the teenagers of the world, but there's actually some purchase there when it comes to the power of the visual.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole nature of visual content is changing quite a bit, right? And so a lot more of it is, what's great is that when it comes to any kind of visual content, there's a massive rising tide, right? All boats are lifted. So yes, live streaming is going to get a hell of a lot bigger. Yes, there's going to be just far more beautiful, pinned and Graham branded content, but there's also just so much activity going on within various kinds of communication apps in particular, where the content isn't easily tracked, right? There are billions of images posted a month where brands don't know what's being said, they don't know what's being shared, they don't typically have great demographic data on these kinds of users. So trying to reach people in this new age where so much of this content is either disappearing or just hidden from the outset, right? It's like, consumers would probably revolt if they discovered that people were peering into their private conversations, so no respectable platform is going to do that. That's going to present a big challenge for brands because they're going to want to find a way to reach these people, figure out what's relevant to them, and I think it's one of the more exciting challenges that brands are going to be facing in the coming year or two.
So when you said disappearing, you didn't mean Snapchat. You meant a whole different thing.
Well, no, Snapchat's part of that, but it's not the only, right? WhatsApp, which is owned by Facebook, is part of that. It might not technically disappear, but brands don't have access to it. You can't run a great insights report on what people are texting each other on WhatsApp around Valentine's Day. So there are some things that maybe from a macro level they can provide, but you're not going to have these great granular insights. And a brand right now could go and look at, say, Father's Day and start looking at the hashtag Father's Day on Instagram, on Pinterest, on YouTube, on Tumblr, and all these places, and see what's been posted previously, how early are people posting things about Father. You can start doing a lot of this yourself, and what's great is that a lot of what's being said so far, like, you have the tools to do so. They could do it a little bit better, and if you're spending millions of dollars, they could do it really well for you. But everyone has access to a lot of this information, and so you can just always be taking advantage of these tools available.
Sure. So we have about 7 minutes, and I'd love to take at least 2 or 3 questions. No?
Come on now. There we go.
Here you go.
Instant articles that just came on Facebook. Can you speak a little bit to that as well? I know the discussion here is more relevant to content, which is...
So the question is instant article and its relevance on Facebook.
Yeah, so the thinking behind instant articles, and I think we just pushed it out live yesterday. Today's Thursday, yesterday. The thinking behind instant articles is pretty simple, which is one of the biggest drop-off points for us, I mean, we've become a big distribution channel for a lot of publishers for content, New York Times, BuzzFeed, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the biggest drop-off points that we found is when people are just trying to load that content, whether the website's not mobilely optimized or for whatever reason, it just takes a long time for the content to load. And so instant articles is a way to surface that content, actually preloaded onto the phone, almost like the way, I mean, we're getting into technicalities here, but the way video loads, right? Like a lot of that stuff is preloaded as it's going through your news feed. And so that way, when you access an article, it's just instant. And that minimizes the drop-off quite a bit. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is just creating a really great immersive experience. In Newsfeed, we know what works on the mobile phone, or at least we have a very strong point of view around that. And so things like being able to pan around photos when you open up an article, or to like, comment, share, right, using the social tools on a lot of the assets in those instant articles. Those are the kind of things that we want to bring to create a more immersive experience on Newsfeed when you're consuming articles.
Another question. Oh, Frank, go ahead.
I'll ask you a question about that. Are your instant articles, do they have video in them?
I'm trying to think of one because we just came out with a few. I mean, I know they will. I just don't know if they.
So if they have video and you've cached it on a phone, what are you guys doing about sort of offline use? Because they may not have the rights to allow a download, for example.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, no. So it's still online. That's more of the technicality of.
Okay.
Yeah. It's still like it's not like you
gotta
can
be
download
connected.
the. Yeah, you have to be connected. Yep.
Do we have another question? I know there are some ladies. Oh, here we go. So the question is, if you couldn't hear, is the topic of data breach, and what are you doing with small businesses to make sure their data is not compromised in any way? Who wants to take that?
I'll jump in for a little bit
Sure.
on it. So I have some friends who are actually in that, or doing some data things. So this isn't related to Google per se, because I didn't work in that area. But the data breach, there's plenty of pretty good security firms out there. But as you saw from Sony, who thought they had their place pretty well locked down, if someone really wants to get in, they're going to get in, right? And it made people nervous about what they had in emails and so forth and so on. What I think you'll start seeing is companies like a McAfee or whatever making a lot of software free that helps you kind of bridge this thing, and you'll start seeing a different kind of software. So 2 years ago, there was this concept of security by obesity, which basically the concept was, let's hide that one piece of data in something that is so large that it's just not possible to download this thing in any sort of short period of time, right? So you'd have like a 12 petabyte file that would hold, your password. No one's going to steal that 12 petabyte file, or if they do, it's going to take an awfully long time, and you'll see it. So you'll start seeing new technologies that'll help you out, and so you'll see new technologies, things will be free, and last there'll be probably a safe harbor law that gets passed for businesses that are.
It's so interesting what you're saying, because, that's not something that we hear as a concern as much as we hear, oh my gosh, there's so much insight, there's so much analytics, there's so much to get through, and we feel almost paralyzed by it. I think that is kind of the larger concern and issue facing the marketplace today, given the fact that it is so personal, consumers are so educated, you want everything to be me first. I definitely think the bigger issue, especially for the small businesses that might not have, the infrastructure in place, is more of how do I use and leverage all the tools I have access to versus, fear of breaching, especially because a lot of platforms don't even necessarily store that kind of information. I think that's kind of the bigger issue that I'm seeing from the marketing front.
David, I would actually put that question to you. Like, how are you advising clients when they've got all of this data that they need to sift through and kind of determine what their next actions are going to be?
Oh, well, I mean, that's why great marketing comes from great insights. So, and that's what it's really about, because there is so much out there, and I think that's why when we do our jobs right, that's why agencies will still presumably be in existence for a while, because we could spend a lot of time focusing on that, and that's just part of the creative process.
I think we have time for one more question, and then I got to close it out. All right, well, any final thoughts? We'll close it out here. I'll start with you, Frank.
Okay, I would just have you take away something that these guys were all talking about, which is how important data is. It gives you incredible insights. There's so much of it, and you'll develop amazing brand marketing campaigns and so forth. You'll also develop amazing new products. And right now, for example, we are capable of taking a silent video, and from that silent video, extracting the sound that was happening in the room while that video was recorded, right? Because when you talk, a potato bag slightly moves, right? And that's all just from data. So the analysis and the analytics are going to get better and better and better. And the big takeaway here is just get as much data as you can without, of course, creeping people out and so forth. But data is super
How
important.
American Beauty of you. You remember that scene? Eva, final thoughts.
I would take that one step further, and one of the things that we do as Pinterest is we just cut to the insight. That's what we present the marketer, because to us it feels like if it's not actionable, if you can't do something with it, then what's the point? Then you're just kind of weighing that person down. So I think as marketers, pushing for those insights and those things that are really actionable, then you kind of bypass the data concerns, because what you're doing is providing a processed product that someone can actually act upon. So that's kind of, I guess, how I would wrap it up.
Deepanjan?
Yeah, so thinking about the power of the visual, I think for video and photos, on Facebook and Instagram, we believe in what we say is good content is a combination of art and science, and I think everyone's saying it here, right? The science being all the data that's available on Facebook and Instagram. We have an audience insights tool, right? Pulling out those really, really key actionable insights that can help inform creative, and then really taking advantage of the canvas, the mobile canvas that you have to develop amazing creative in Newsfeed.
And David?
I think instead, just because it's a whole thing about visual content, I just want to take a stage selfie here so that when I post about this session, I'll even smile for my own one, then take pictures of all you lovely people, then I've got some really good visual content to share.
Great. Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panel.